partner, Lariah Johnson, and we will be discussing the most outstanding eras of American history. With the end of World War I and the passage of the 18th Amendment, Americans entered the distinctive 1920s, an era of Republican leadership, nationalistic and fundamentalist movements, and changing of socialist conventions.
So what are we going to talk about first, Temp?
Well, let's talk about the presidents during the era. Who do we have first, Mariah?
Well, first we have Warren G. Harding, and he was the President of the United States from 1921 to 1923. Because of an untimely death, he was succeeded by Calvin Coolidge. And then after Calvin Coolidge was president, Herbert Hoover took over.
Before we go into detail, let's have our one and only Al Capizzi give us a little intro on this topic.
Woo!
Yeah. Al Capizzi about to talk about the presidents. Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, right in the 1920s politics. First there was Harding, and I kinda question his competence. Scandals and corruption just ruined my confidence in this guy. But still he had some nice financial policies, more industrialization and a laissez-faire economy. He also advocated African civil rights, political and economic equality for blacks and whites. And then he died of natural causes in 1923, succeeded by Coolidge, who was the current VP. He continued Harding's policies without all the scandals, and he handled the presidency without having a shambles. After him, Hoover took over, a rugged individual. He believed the individual was an unconditional part of society, and he was convinced they made the nation. And that is the end of my presidency summation.
Performance, Al. So let's continue about this and get the main ideas.
Okay, well, first of all three presidents were of the Republican Party, and Harding was most likely the least qualified for the job, but the political bosses determined that Harding would be the easiest to control because of that factor.
Yes, and his platform was for lower taxes, higher tariffs, and farmer aid, and also he didn't really like the League of Nations.
Yeah, and he was also president during the Teapot Dome scandal, which we'll talk about really soon. Next we have Calvin Coolidge, who took after Harding's death, and he continued Harding's policies of like lower taxes and opposition to the League of Nations, but he was more pro-business than Harding was. He also embodied the hopes and spirits of the middle-class citizens, and he achieved widespread prosperity in 1928.
However, some historians believe that Calvin Coolidge's economic policies led to the Great Depression.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Lastly, we have Herbert Hoover, who was president during the 1929 Wall Street crash. He believed strongly in the efficiency movement, which held that the government and the economy were riddled with inefficiency and waste, and they could be improved by experts who could identify the problem and solve them.
Yes, and Hoover tried to stop the Great Depression with government-enforced efforts, public work projects such as the Hoover Dam, and tariffs such as the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which increased the top tax bracket from 25% to 63% and increased in corporate taxes. These initiatives did not produce economic recovery during his term and served as the groundwork for various policies incorporated in the Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal.
Whoa, hold on, Temperance, that is a lot of information.
Next up, we have legislative acts and federal policies, along with scandals and crime. Al Capizzi, take it away.
What must I say? What must I do to show how much I think about freaking you? What must I say? What
Yeah, during the 1920s, many acts were put into place. Legislation was common, and it put the nation on pace to be great. The 18th Amendment was one of the laws that prohibit alcohol, but it still had many flaws. Kinda like the National Origins Act in 1924. It halted immigration from Asia, and it closed the door to Southern and Eastern European countries. Oh my, it also caused a number of immigrants to say bye-bye. We also got the Revenue Act of 1926. Large tax cuts were given to America's wealthiest. The federal policy encouraged industrialization, and a strong economy was key to fulfill the expectation of a great nation. Even though we halted immigrations by Asians, I see the reasons, but I don't see the application. And the verse next is about to be about crime, so hold up and listen to the chorus while you think about the rhyme. Yeah.
What must I say? What must I do to show how much I think about freaking you? What must I say? What must I do to show how much
Yeah.
I think about freaking you?
Because of the 18th, the people had to resort to crime to get their alcohol. The gangsters competed to sell their wine. The biggest and baddest was definitely Al Capone, public enemy #1. Yeah, he probably was well known. In the gang wars, about 500 people lost their lives, and these criminals got away. Even when they were tried, they provided false alibis and were rarely convicted. Why is it that these criminals were able to do things unrestricted? I don't know. Prostitution, gambling, and narcotics is how these gangsters made money. How very unpatriotic. In 1932, Charles Lindbergh's son was kidnapped. This shocked the nation and caused the Congress to snap, creating Lindbergh Law, supposedly a remedy in cases of abduction. The punishment's a death penalty. Yeah. Damn.
What must I say? What must I do to show how much I think about freaking you? What must I say? What must I do to show how much I think about freaking you? What must I say?
Wow, that was a lot of information out. I really like the details on the Legislative Act during the 1920s. I also like to add to the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. It authorized shipping boards to sell 1,500 plus World War I ships to shippers. Yeah. Oh, and also the Code Act of 1921. This put a maximum number of immigrants allowed to come into the U.S. annually, and that was about 350,000.
One thing Al forgot to mention, however, is the Teapot Dome scandal. The Teapot Dome was regarded as the greatest scandal in American political history before the Watergate scandal occurred. It also badly hurt the reputation of the Harding administration. Temperance, will you please explain this to me?
Sure, Lariah. The Teapot Dome scandal was a bribery incident in which the Interior Secretary Albert B. Fall accepted bribes from Edward Doheny and Henry Sinclair over oil drilling rights in Teapot, Wyoming. The leisure rights were legal at the time, but the money changing hands was illegal, and Fall attempted to keep this a secret. However, his standard of living improved greatly from the bribes, and the event succumbed to investigation.
Oh, alright. Well, in addition to the Teapot Dome scandal, crime was very common during the 1920s. During Prohibition, Attorney General Harry Daugherty possibly sold liquor pardons and permits. Also, many of the gangs competed against each other to sell illegal alcohol. Like Al Capizzi said, Al Capone was one of the biggest and baddest gangsters of the time.
Oh, yes he was. And he was also really ugly in my opinion. Like, I don't know why they made him really good looking in Night at the Museum too. I guess it was just like bad casting.
Oh, shut up! This isn't the time for this. Our next topic is court cases. The first court case is the Sacco and Vanzetti case. I have a short clip I would like to show the audience about these two Italian immigrants.
Where we are is the crime site of the, you might say, the crime of the century.
I can remember walking up the street alone and seeing all these cars and people around my house, and I couldn't believe what had happened.
It's a lot more than a criminal case. It's a phenomenon.
These were not two ordinary men. These were men of poetic sensibilities. These were men of infinite courage. Sacco and Vanzetti are anarchists. They are opponents of the war. They are unpatriotic. And this becomes far more important than whether they committed this robbery and this murder.
There's really no place in the world that's untouched by this trial by the summer of 1927. I think one of the reasons that the case has lasting meaning is because it speaks to issues that remain alive today.
There's always something that happens in the daily newspapers that brings that case to mind.
It's a story that talks about the injustices of prejudice in a society because of the social position that you occupy.
It exposes realities that many people would like to forget. If you espouse the wrong political views, if you are not a conformist, the chances of you getting a fair trial are substantially diminished. And if Italians are no longer looked upon with the disdain and contempt they were in 1920, they've been replaced by other ethnic groups.
You are enraged about what happened. You are saddened by what happened, and it motivates you to do things in your life so that it doesn't happen again.
Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were Italian anarchists who reflected the times of anti-Redism and anti-Fordism. Although they had little evidence against them, they were sentenced to death for murders of 2 employees at a shoe company in Massachusetts. Our other case is the Scopes trial, or monkey trial, of 1925. Laura, please explain.
Well, let's see. The accused was John T. Scopes, and he was a biology teacher who was indicted for teaching evolution. The trial pitted fundamentalists who didn't believe in evolution against modernists who believed that evolution fit in with the Bible's teachings. The fundamentalists believed in a literal reading of the Bible. In actuality, Scopes didn't even realize he was teaching evolution. The trial's main purpose was to attract publicity to the small town of Dayton, Tennessee. In the end, Scopes was guilty and fined $100.
Very nice. Our next topic will be discussed by Al Capizzi. Immigration and Red Scare. Do it.
Yeah. In 1920 to 21, 800,000 stepped ashore, 2/3 from southern Eastern Europe, before they closed the door with all the quotas and restrictions. Immigration during this era was witnessing a crucifixion. It was non-fiction. The Immigration Act of 1924 was kinda brutal. It listed quotas on European immigrants, which wasn't useful. It also completely shut out the Japanese from our land. Man, sometimes it's hard for me to even understand. Italians, Jews, and Poles lived in isolated enclaves with their own houses of worship, newspapers, and behavior, feeling like they were unfavored. Employers kept their rivalries divided, and they would fight amongst their neighbors. Cultural pluralists opposed the restrictions. They believed a melting pot would eliminate ethnic differences, and that's the end. Next up is the Red Scare. Yeah. Was the fear of communism taking over. It was fueled by the Russian Revolution, I call it October. Eugene Debs, he was gaining strength, a very well-known socialist who happened to live in the United States during the time of the Red Scare. The Scare also brought on another concerning affair known as the Palmer raids. A bomb was exploded at the house of General Palmer, and he was done with all the charades. He set up a bureau of investigation to inspect the bombings. Many arrests were made, but they were not very calming in the end. It gave the U.S. experience in investigations, which would be helpful later on and protect against devastation. Suspected foreigners and radicals were put on the Red Ark, and they were deported to Russia, leaving cities like New York. Hoover and Palmer had a plan to make arrests, but it mainly failed due to lack of communication at best.
The U.S. cut off people from coming. Oh, and they were afraid of a communist rise.
Good job. I would also like to add that the quota system affected a pivotal departure in American policies. In 1931, more foreigners actually left the United States than arrived.
Alright, so let's watch a quick clip on the Red Scare to add to what Al Capizzi talked about.
Hey Frank, is this the location of the secret communist meeting?
I think it is. Let's go.
Welcome, comrades, to the first meeting of the Peaceful Communist Society, and now our glorious leader, Bratislav Bavanovich. Welcome, comrades. This meeting shall outline the fundamental principles of our society.
Mr. Hoover, some dirty group of commies is having a secret meeting outside of New York.
Thank you, Julia. You can now be on your way. John, get me Palmer. Marshall Palmer.
Alright, man, we got some freedom-hating, baby-eating commies in there. Are we gonna allow this stuff to happen right outside of our own New York City? I know I'm not. So let's go in there and kick some commie butt.
Yay!
And in this way, we will peacefully hold these meetings without hurting anybody or doing anything illegal in the slightest.
What was that?
We've got you now, you dirty commies. You can't do this to me. I have my rights. I'm not doing anything wrong.
Resisting arrest, are ya? Well, resist this.
I find you guilty on all charges and sentence you to deportation. It was a time when the liberty and freedoms of many were violated simply for their beliefs. A time when none could feel truly free. It was America's darkest hour. It was the Red Scare.
That was interesting.
Yes, it was. Wait, Temperance, have we talked about women during the 1920s yet?
No, we haven't. They were really important during this era. For example, they led the 18th Amendment, which, if you can remember, was prohibition of alcohol. Sorry about that. They also campaigned for Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution under the leadership of Alice Paul and the National Women's Party.
They also started a new kind of independence. It was like sex o'clock in America, the way the women acted. Flappers, as they called them, were a new breed of women that wore short skirts, bobbed hair, and smoked. They treated sex in a casual way. Because of this, advertisements exploited the newly found sexual allure to sell their products.
Yes, women definitely witnessed a change during the 1920s. But how about our attitudes towards Indians, Lariah?
Well, we try to increase education for the Indians to help assimilate them into our culture. Also, there was the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they began discouraging boarding schools, and some of the biggest boarding schools for Indians were closed down. In 1924, all Indians became citizens.
Oh, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs began to focus on health, education, and welfare for Indians.
Thanks, Temperance. And that wraps up our show on 1920s politics. Thanks, guys.
Bye.